I would never have thought that this could happen to me. Don't repeat my mistakes. The snow had just started to fall, soft and silent, as I pulled the heavy curtains closed in the living room. The house felt quieter this year, though the holidays had always been a quiet sort of affair ever since my divorce. I'd lived in this old 2-story house for almost 20 years now. White siding, blue shutters, creaky floorboards that had their own opinions about where you walked. The kind of house that holds memories like dust in the corners. This year felt different. My son Daniel was coming home for the first time in nearly 4 years. He'd been living in Portland, busy with work, a relationship that eventually fizzled out, and what he called figuring himself out. I tried not to take it personally when the visits stopped. I told myself that's just what adult children do. They grow up, they leave, and they come back different. If they come back at all. The last time I saw him, he was 24. Slender, still a little unsure of himself, his smile always cautious, like he was afraid of disappointing me. Now he was nearly 28. When he finally stepped through the door that Friday evening, I barely recognized the man standing on my welcome mat. He was taller, somehow broader. His beard had grown in thick, trimmed neat, and his shoulders looked stronger, more confident. The kind of man who knew where he stood in the world. His voice was deeper, calmer, as he said, "Hey, Mom." I reached out, arms instinctively open. "Daniel," I said, feeling the syllables press against my chest. He hugged me tightly with both arms, more like a man embracing someone he missed, not just a son going through the motions. The first night passed with laughter, wine, and the gentle glow of our old fireplace casting warm shadows across the living room. He told me about Portland, about the long hikes he took alone, about the music he'd gotten into, and how he'd started working with local artists, helping manage events and galleries. I was fascinated, proud. But I couldn't ignore the lingering sense that something had changed. There was something unsaid, resting in the way he looked at me. Observant, quiet. We settled into a comfortable rhythm over the weekend. He helped me carry boxes of decorations from the attic. We strung lights on the banister and set up the tree together, just like we used to when he was little. He still liked the multicolored lights. I had always preferred the soft white ones, but I didn't say anything. It was Sunday evening when things began to shift. We were in the kitchen. He was helping me with the dishes after dinner, something he never used to offer to do. The sink was full of soapy water, and the radio played soft Christmas jazz in the background. I turned to hand him a towel, and for just a second, our hands touched. It was the way he looked at me, eyes locking for a heartbeat too long, that made the air shift around us. There was a pause, not awkward, but heavy, weighted with something I couldn't name. "You look different," he said, drying a plate. I laughed nervously. "Well, that's what 10 years and a few gray hairs will do to a woman." "No," he said softly. "I mean, you look good, strong, like you've come into yourself." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "That's sweet of you to say." He set the plate down and turned to face me fully. "I don't say things just to be sweet anymore. I mean it." The silence stretched. I tried to busy myself with the remaining dishes, but my hand trembled just enough to make me clumsy. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded too quickly. "Just tired, that's all." But it wasn't the kind of tired that sleep could fix. It was the kind that comes from suddenly feeling seen, truly seen, after years of going unnoticed. That night I lay in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts ran in circles. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, and how I felt hearing it. like some deep part of me had been stirred awake, a part that I had tucked away so long ago I almost forgot it existed. The next day, things felt almost normal. Almost. We baked cookies together, an old tradition from when he was a boy. He insisted on using too many chocolate chips, just like always. The smell of sugar and butter filled the house, and for a while it was just laughter and music and warmth. But the way he looked at me hadn't changed. If anything, it had grown more intense, more intentional. Later that afternoon, we sat by the fire, mugs of hot cocoa in hand. The snow had picked up outside, painting the windows with soft frost. The glow of the flames flickered against his face as he turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. Have you ever felt like there was a part of you that got lost when you became a parent?" The question hit me like a quiet gust of wind. I looked down at the steam rising from my mug. "Yes," I said. "I think a lot of things changed when I had you. I loved being your mom more than anything. But, yeah, some parts of me got put away. I don't even know where some of them went." He nodded slowly, staring into the fire. "I think about that," he said. "About how we change for the people we love, and how sometimes we forget who we are outside of those roles." I felt a lump rise in my throat. That's a very grown-up thing to say. He smiled gently. "Well, you raised me after all." That night, we sat a little closer on the couch. It felt natural, familiar, but also charged with something unspoken. His arm brushed against mine as we watched an old movie, the kind we used to watch when he was a teenager. I couldn't focus on the screen. All I could feel was the warmth of him beside me, the soft scent of his cologne, and the way my heart had started to thump against my ribs like it had found a new rhythm. Something was happening. I didn't understand it fully, but I couldn't deny it. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to. The snow fell harder outside as the night deepened. Inside, the fire crackled, and our laughter turned to quiet conversation, then to long stretches of silence that didn't need to be filled. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew something inside me had shifted, and there was no going back. The morning light slipped through the blinds in gentle streaks, and I woke with a strange calmness. Daniel was already in the kitchen, humming softly as he made breakfast: scrambled eggs, bacon, toast. The smell brought me back to lazy Sunday mornings when he was a boy, still in pajamas, barefoot and messy-haired. But now he stood tall, collected, his movements deliberate. "You sleep okay?" he asked, placing a plate in front of me. "Yes," I lied. He sat across from me, his eyes steady on mine as we ate. Conversation flowed naturally. Books we'd read, music, movies. But underneath it all, there was a deeper current pulling us both forward. We didn't speak of it. We didn't name it. But it was there. Later that day, while putting away decorations in the attic, we reached for the same box at the same time. Our hands touched again, and this time neither of us pulled away. His eyes met mine, searching, questioning. I didn't have answers, only questions of my own. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Alive. And so the holidays continued, not in the way I had expected, but in a way I couldn't ignore. Something was blooming in the silence between our words. Something real. And I knew, even then, that this Christmas would change everything. The snow continued to fall in soft waves, coating the street outside in a quiet kind of peace that only winter could bring. I stood at the kitchen window, watching it swirl beneath the old lamppost on the corner. The morning had come slow and thick, like honey. My coffee had gone cold in my hand. I hadn't even taken a sip. Behind me, the house was still, except for the occasional creak from the radiator and the rhythmic thud of Daniel's footsteps upstairs. He had always walked heavily, even as a child. I used to tell him he'd make a terrible thief. Now the sound comforted me, like it anchored something in place that had felt adrift for too long. He came down not long after, wearing the same sweatshirt from the night before, his hair mussed slightly. There was a familiarity in the way he moved around the kitchen that both warmed and unsettled me. He belonged here, but in a way that had started to feel different than it used to. Less like a boy coming home, and more like a man, seeing me, truly seeing me, for the first time. "You didn't sleep much," he said softly, opening the cupboard to grab a mug. I turned away from the window, managing a half smile. "You can tell." "I know your tells, Mom." He poured coffee, black, no sugar. "You used to stay up when I was out late in high school. Pretend you were asleep on the couch, but I'd always hear you shift when I came in." That memory hit me in the chest, a mixture of nostalgia and a strange ache I couldn't name. "I guess some things don't change," I said, rushing a crumb from the counter. He leaned against the sink, sipping his coffee, eyes never leaving mine. "Some things do." That hung in the air between us. We went for a walk later that morning. The wind was sharp but not cruel, and the snow under our boots crunched with each step. We didn't talk much at first, just walked down the neighborhood streets past houses strung with lights and wreaths. Some things looked exactly as they had for years. Some houses had changed, like the people inside them. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a pair of gloves, mine. "You left these on the bench," he said, offering them. I took them, feeling the brush of his fingers as he handed them over. Even through the gloves, the contact felt charged. Or maybe I was just imagining it. Maybe I wanted to imagine it. Back home, we made soup together. I had always found cooking therapeutic, and doing it beside him, sharing space, movements, and quiet gestures, felt grounding. When I leaned over to stir the pot, he stood behind me, closer than he needed to be. I felt his hand, light on the small of my back, steadying me. There was no reason for it. Nothing in front of me was unstable. Still, I didn't move. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I've been thinking about something." I didn't turn. "What's that?" "This trip. Being here. You." I swallowed. My hands kept moving, mechanically, as I stirred. But my thoughts had stalled. "What about it?" He paused, and I could feel him weighing the moment. "I wasn't sure what I was coming back to," he said finally. "It's been years. I didn't know who you'd be now / or if you'd still feel like home." I turned to face him then. His eyes were so open, so filled with something deeper than I was ready to name. "And," I asked quietly. "You're more than I remembered," he said. "More than I ever let myself see." That night, everything felt like it had shifted an inch further into the unknown. We ate dinner slowly, not because the food was remarkable, but because the quiet between us was alive with something unsaid. Our glances lingered longer. Our conversations drifted deeper. Later, we sat together on the couch again, the lights from the Christmas tree casting soft colors against the walls. We didn't put on a movie this time. We just talked. He told me things he'd never shared before, his doubts about his future, the loneliness that crept in after his last breakup, how he'd thought about calling me 100 times but didn't know what to say. "I thought I had to be strong before I saw you again," he admitted. "But maybe I just needed to be honest." I reached for his hand. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. He didn't flinch. His fingers wrapped around mine, warm and solid. I looked down at our hands, then up at him. You don't have to be anything but who you are, Daniel. You never did. He looked at me like I was a stranger he'd known forever. There was something almost reverent in the way his gaze traced my face. My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. I missed you, he said, barely above a whisper. I missed you too. He leaned forward slightly, like he might kiss my forehead, but then paused, hesitating. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment, from how real it was, how dangerous it felt to let myself be vulnerable, to acknowledge something I had spent days, years, avoiding. When his hand brushed my cheek, I closed my eyes. The touch was light, careful. His thumb traced just below my temple, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt seen. Not as a mother, not as someone holding a role, but as a woman, a person, someone with needs, with a history, with a pulse still beating. We didn't say much after that. He sat with me until the fire went out, then kissed my forehead, soft, tender, and went upstairs. I sat there for a long time, wrapped in a blanket and my own confusion. What were we doing? I didn't know, but I knew it didn't feel wrong. It felt unfinished. The next day brought more snow, thicker now, the roads glazed with frost. Daniel offered to shovel the driveway, and I watched him from the front window, the rhythm of his movements hypnotic. He was strong, steady, capable. Everything I had hoped he'd grow into, but with something else beneath it all. A sensitivity that hadn't faded. A gentleness that disarmed me. He came inside, flushed from the cold, his breath still catching in the warmth of the entryway. You didn't have to do all that, I said. He smiled. I wanted to. That evening, I lit candles throughout the house. It was something I did every winter, but this time it felt intentional. Like I was setting a stage I didn't fully understand. Daniel helped me with the dishes again, and this time, when our hands touched, he didn't pull away. Neither did I. Later, he stood beside me at the fireplace, both of us silent. He reached for my hand, laced his fingers with mine. I didn't resist. I don't want to overstep, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Then don't, I said. And still, neither of us moved. Something was happening. Something deeper than what could be explained by time or distance or title. We were two people orbiting something we didn't yet know how to name, but couldn't deny. The night grew darker. The snow kept falling. And my breath was no longer steady. It had begun. The wind picked up that night, brushing against the windows in restless waves, as if the storm outside echoed the turmoil inside me. I couldn't sleep. I'd tried. Pulled the covers up, turned off the lamp, closed my eyes again and again. But every time I did, my mind brought me back to Daniel. His voice, his touch, the way he looked at me like he knew something I hadn't yet said out loud. It wasn't confusion that kept me awake. It was clarity. I had spent most of my adult life defined by roles: wife, mother, caretaker. There hadn't been much space for the version of me who had once laughed too loud in movie theaters, who'd danced barefoot in the kitchen on summer nights, who'd wanted more than routine and responsibility. That woman had gone quiet over the years. Not gone, just silent. But Daniel had looked at me, spoken to me, like he saw her. Still there, still alive beneath it all. And I didn't know what to do with that. In the early morning, I finally gave up on sleep. I padded downstairs in my robe, feet cold on the wooden steps. The fire in the living room had long since gone out, but the soft glow from the Christmas tree still lit the room in warm, shifting colors. I sat on the couch, pulled the knit blanket over my lap, and tried to breathe. I wasn't there long before I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel. He didn't say anything at first, just walked in slowly, barefoot, wearing an old t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. His hair was tousled, his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. I shook my head. No. He sat beside me, close but not too close. We stared at the tree for a moment, the blinking lights casting soft shadows on the walls. "I kept thinking about earlier," he said finally. "About us." My heart tightened. Me too. He turned toward me then, one knee tucked on the couch, his arm resting on the back of the cushion behind me. "I know this probably feels strange," he said, "and I've been trying to figure out why it doesn't feel wrong." I looked at him, not blinking, because it's not. He exhaled, slow. "I didn't expect this. I didn't come here thinking anything would happen, but now I'm here, and I see you. And I don't mean like a memory or like someone I used to know. I see you now, as you are." His voice trembled just slightly. I reached out before I could stop myself and touched his hand. "You're not alone in this," I said softly. I felt it too. There was something fragile in that moment, like a soap bubble suspended in air, glimmering, weightless, beautiful, and so easy to break. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine. My eyes fluttered closed. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he whispered. "You're not," I whispered back. Then, for the first time in years, I let go of everything I thought I was supposed to feel, and allowed myself to simply exist in the moment. When his lips met mine, they didn't ask, they offered. A quiet, tentative kiss, more of a question than an answer. But I answered, with every inch of me. There was no chaos, no rush, just warmth, recognition. The kiss deepened slowly, then parted with a breath. "I don't know what this means," I said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I don't want to stop feeling it." The night wrapped around us like a cocoon. We didn't speak much after that, just leaned into each other on the couch, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against him. For the first time in a very long time, I felt safe, not just physically, but emotionally. Like I was allowed to be vulnerable again. The next morning came with hesitation, as if even the sun wasn't sure how to rise after a night like that. We moved through breakfast with quiet care. He made coffee. I toasted bread. Our hands brushed, and our eyes met, but we said nothing. We were both thinking. Afterward, we walked outside together, the snow crunching underfoot, the air sharp and crisp. The world looked clean, like it had been washed overnight. There was a stillness in the street, but not inside me. Inside me was a tremble of something fragile and alive. He broke the silence as we passed the neighbor's house. "Do you think we're crazy?" I smiled faintly. "Probably." "But not wrong?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "I think sometimes life brings people back together in ways we don't expect. And maybe it's not about right or wrong. Maybe it's about truth." He looked at me then, eyes intense. "And what's your truth?" "That I've never felt more seen, more wanted, and it terrifies me." He stopped walking. "You don't have to be scared." I nodded slowly. "But I am." He reached for my hand, squeezed it. Then we'll go slow. We don't have to name it. Just feel it. That night, we decorated the tree together, finishing what we had started days earlier. We hung the final ornaments, memories from years past. Baby's first Christmas. Handmade crafts from his grade school years. A silver angel I'd bought the year after his father left. Each one held a story. And now this year, it held a new one still unfolding. After we finished, I made hot toddies, and we curled up on the couch again, like two souls resting after an invisible storm. "Do you regret any of this?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I answered, without hesitation. "I don't either," he said. I turned to look at him. His eyes were steady, full of emotion. "What happens when you leave?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't know, but I'll come back." That was enough for now. Because sometimes the deepest discoveries don't come with maps. They come in the quiet moments, in the slow unfolding of what we feel but can't explain. I didn't know where the road led. But I knew, without doubt, I had started walking it. And I wasn't alone. The snow began to melt slowly over the next few days, dripping from the rooftops in soft, rhythmic patterns. It was as if the world outside had started to thaw, just as something inside me had begun to do the same. The holidays were nearing their end, and with each passing hour, I felt the clock tightening its grip around the fragile space Daniel and I had created. It had been 5 days since he came home. 5 days of rediscovery. 5 days of walking an invisible line between past and present, memory and possibility. And now we stood at the edge of something we couldn't quite name. That morning, I found myself rearranging the bookshelf in the living room, something I hadn't done in years. I didn't need to. It was just something to keep my hands moving. My thoughts kept circling the same point, like a bird afraid to land. Daniel was upstairs packing. Not to leave just yet. Had decided to stay an extra day. But I could feel the weight of his departure already in the air. Like the walls themselves knew what was coming and wanted to hold it off just a little longer. He came down not long after, carrying a small bag but wearing a soft expression. "I only packed the things I don't need today," he said. "Hope that's okay." "Of course," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. He sat on the couch, watched me for a long moment. "You've been quiet." "I've been thinking." "About what?" "Everything." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Me too." I crossed the room and sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his arm, but not quite touching. I stared at the tree, still lit, ornaments twinkling like tiny secrets. "I don't want to lose what we found," I said finally. "But I don't know how it survives outside this house." His gaze was steady, grounded. "We're not the same people out there, I know. But maybe we carry this with us. And maybe that's enough." "What is this, Daniel?" I asked gently. "Is it just a moment, something passing?" He reached out then, took my hand in his. His thumb traced slow circles on my skin. "It's real," he said. "Whatever else it is, it's real, and I'm not willing to pretend it didn't happen." A silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, but weighty. "There's a part of me that feels alive again," I whispered, "and I didn't even know it had died." He leaned in, kissed my temple. "You're not alone in that." We spent the afternoon making one last meal together. Roasted chicken with rosemary and lemon, root vegetables, warm bread. We moved around the kitchen with a rhythm we hadn't planned but had somehow learned over the week. I noticed the way he moved around me. Careful, respectful, present. Every small gesture carried intention. He wasn't just helping me cook. He was choosing to be there, with me. After dinner, we took a walk. The streets were quiet, the snow now a thin layer beneath our boots. The sky was a deep indigo, stars blinking through the cold air. We walked side by side, occasionally brushing shoulders. "I don't want to go," he said. "You have to." "I know." A pause. "But I'll be back, if you want me to be." I turned to look at him. "I want that." We walked further, passing familiar houses with unfamiliar quiet. When we reached the hill near the old park, we stopped, looked out over the town. "It's strange," he said, "how everything can look the same and feel so different." "Life does that," I said. "It shifts underneath you, and then suddenly you're somewhere new without even realizing how you got there." He turned to face me, both hands holding mine now. "I've thought a lot about how I see you," he said. "Not just as my mom, but as a person, a woman, someone who gave me everything and still somehow kept something for herself." "I don't know if I did," I said. "I think I lost parts of myself over the years." He shook his head. "No, I think they were just waiting to be seen again." We stood there in the cold for a long time, and then he kissed me, soft, deliberate, full of all the emotion neither of us could find words for. It wasn't reckless, it wasn't confusing. It was just honest. When we got home, the house felt quieter. Not empty, just full of something unspoken. We didn't talk much that night. We curled up on the couch again, my head on his chest, his hand in mine. The fire cracked low, and the clock ticked softly in the corner. The end was coming, but it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a beginning we hadn't expected. The next morning, he left early. We hugged in the doorway, long and silent. His bag was slung over one shoulder, his eyes clear. "I'll call when I land," he said. I nodded. "Be safe." He kissed me, this time on the lips, brief but lingering, and then turned to go. I stood at the door long after he left, watching the empty street, the sky just starting to glow with morning. Later, I walked through the house, touched the places he'd stood, picked up his coffee mug, folded the blanket he'd used. Every object felt different now, filled with a presence that hadn't quite left. I sat down at the kitchen table, poured myself a cup of coffee, and looked out the window. I wasn't the same woman I'd been before he came home. I didn't know exactly what we were now, or what would come next, but I knew what I felt wasn't shame or guilt or regret. It was awakening. It was the feeling of being fully seen and choosing not to turn away. The holidays had brought him back to me, but they had also brought me back to myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. No matter what the world outside thought, no matter what names we gave it, some truths belonged to the soul alone, and mine had finally found its voice again.